was spring break of our junior year in college, and my best friend Kinsey and I were long overdue for a real road trip. Just the two of us, windows down, playlists blasting, escaping the stress of midterms and dorm drama. We chose Missouri. Not the most glamorous destination, but it had the Ozarks, lakes, woods, little hidden towns, and it was far enough from Chicago to feel like we were going somewhere, without being so far that our parents would freak out. We didn't plan much. Kinsey booked a couple motels, and I mapped out gas stations and roadside attractions. It was supposed to be relaxing. It wasn't. It started on day 2. We were somewhere outside of Raleigh, heading south through long stretches of two-lane highway. Nothing around but farmland, rusted-out barns, the occasional gas station with names like Bob's Quick Stop and Howdy Mart. The sky was that perfect kind of overcast, gray, but calm, and the air smelled like damp earth. I remember it was early afternoon when we noticed the truck. It was a white Ford pickup, the kind with no logo on the side, just plain and boxy, like it had been stripped down for work or something else. At first, we didn't think much of it. Kinsey was driving, and I was scrolling through our Spotify queue when I looked in the side mirror and noticed the truck pulling out of a field road behind us. It was far enough back that it didn't seem weird. Rural roads all sort of bleed into each other, but it didn't turn off. It just followed. 20 minutes passed. The truck was still behind us. Not tailgating, not weaving, just there, holding pace, matching us. I think he's been back there since that last gas station, I said. Kinsey glanced in the rear view. Yeah, I noticed. You think he's headed to the same town? Maybe. Neither of us said anything for a minute. Then Kinsey flicked on the turn signal and made a sudden right onto a gravel side road. The truck followed. Okay, what the hell? I said, sitting up straighter. The road curved between tree-lined hills, too narrow for a U-turn without backing up. We slowed, watching to see if the truck would pass us. It didn't. It slowed too. And that's when Kinsey did something smart. She pulled off into the first driveway we saw, an old hunting cabin with no cars, and turned the car around fast. We sat there, engine running, heartbeat spiking. The truck came around the bend. Past us. Slowly. I caught a glimpse of the driver through the side window. A man, maybe 50s. Thick beard, ball cap, blank expression. He didn't look at us. Not once. Okay, that's creepy, Kinsey said. Let's wait 5 minutes, then head back. We gave it 7, then pulled back onto the road. The truck was gone. We laughed it off that night. Told ourselves he was just a local. Maybe a farmer. Maybe he thought we were lost. Maybe it was nothing. But we started seeing the truck again. Outside the diner the next morning. Parked 2 spaces away at the gas station in Branson. Once, pulled just barely off the shoulder of the road near a scenic overlook. Always the same. White. No plates. Driver never visible. By day 4, we were paranoid. We started taking alternate routes. Using side roads. Keeping track of every turn, every passing vehicle. But it didn't matter. No matter where we went, the truck found us. Sometimes hours later. Sometimes at night. Kinsey thought maybe we were being tracked. We checked the car. No air tags. No magnetic GPS devices. Nothing. We changed hotels. Paid in cash. Still, the truck returned. The worst encounter happened the night before we were set to drive home. We were staying in a little lakeside motel just north of Springfield. One of those L-shaped places with exterior doors and an ice machine that never worked. It was around 2 a.m. when I woke up to headlights pouring through the crack in the curtains. I got up quietly, heart thudding, peeked out the side. It was the truck, parked directly in front of our room. Engine off, headlights on, just sitting there. I reached over and shook Kinsey awake. She groaned, disoriented. Then I whispered, "He's here." We turned off the lights. Stayed low. The headlights stayed on for 5 more minutes. Then they shut off. But the truck didn't leave. We couldn't see anything through the curtains now, just the shape of the cab, parked too close to our door. Kinsey grabbed the pepper spray from her purse. I held the key fob, ready to hit the panic button. We waited, and waited. At 3:47 a.m., the truck drove away. No screech, no rush, just rolled off into the night. We left at dawn. No coffee, no gas. Just drove until we crossed into Illinois. We didn't see the truck again. Not once. We never filed a police report. We didn't have a plate. Didn't even have a picture. What were we going to say? Some guy followed us for 4 days and never did anything? But something about it still doesn't sit right. The fact that he never made contact. Never flashed his lights. Never honked. Never yelled. He just watched. Waited. Matched our speed. Like he was playing a game we didn't understand. A few months ago, Kinsey texted me a link to a Reddit post. It was from someone driving through Kansas. They described being followed for hours by a white Ford truck. No plates. No decals. Driver never visible. They took side roads. Pulled off. It kept finding them. One of the comments mentioned similar stories dating back to the early 2000s. No confirmed crimes. No arrests. Just sightings. Always rural roads. Always spring or early summer. Always a white truck. Sometimes, late at night, I'll glance at the street below my apartment. And for a second, I swear I see it. Parked beneath the streetlight. Engine off. Just waiting. And I wonder, what would have happened if we stopped? If we rolled down the window? If we followed him? What game were we actually in? And did we win? Or just leave before the rules changed? Airports are strange places. They're meant to feel secure, well-lit, busy, heavily monitored, but if you've ever spent enough time in one, especially overnight, you know that beneath the surface there's a weird emptiness. A kind of liminal fog, like the world forgets you're there. That's how I felt during my layover in Charlotte last spring. I was flying home from a visit with my sister in Savannah. A quick trip, but a series of delays turned what should have been a 3-hour connection into an overnight crawl through purgatory. And somewhere around 1 a.m., that's when I noticed the man. He was average looking, mid-50s, maybe a little older. Tin windbreaker, gray stubble, ball cap pulled low. The kind of face that doesn't register in your memory unless you make yourself remember it. And for some reason, the second I noticed him, I did exactly that. He was sitting across from me at gate B17. I was scrolling through my phone, earbuds in, trying to kill time until the new departure slot at 5:40 a.m. Every so often, I'd glance up, and he was still there, not doing anything. No phone, no book, just watching me. At first, I told myself it was nothing, that I was being paranoid. But when I moved, got up to get a coffee, he stood up too. Kept his distance, but followed. I ducked into a small Hudson News and pretended to browse. A minute later, I spotted him in the reflection of the refrigerator door. Still watching. Still smiling. That was the first time I really noticed his eyes. They didn't match his smile. I walked quickly back toward gate B17, then ducked into the women's restroom. Locked myself in a stall and waited. 10 minutes. When I came out, he was gone. I exhaled, half laughing at my own overreaction. Maybe he was just another tired traveler. Maybe he was waiting for someone and thought I looked familiar. But when I got back to my seat, I noticed something strange. My phone charger, plugged into the outlet below the seat, was missing. Gone. And in its place, neatly resting on the seat cushion, was a business card. Blank on the front. On the back, handwritten in shaky ink. Wrong gate. I moved, grabbed my stuff, heart pounding now, and went to the opposite end of the concourse. Found a cluster of sleeping passengers near gate C9 and tucked myself between them, pretending to be asleep. Every 20 minutes or so, I peeked out. No sign of him. At 3:12 a.m., I checked the boards. Gate change. My flight had moved to gate D4, far into the terminal. I stood, stretched, and walked, trying to stay calm, trying not to look behind me. The walk to D4 took me past a section of closed shops. The lights were dimmer there. Cleaning crews had mostly gone. It felt like walking through an abandoned mall at midnight. Echoes, flickering lights, too much silence. I made it to D4. No one was there. No flight staff. No passengers. Just him, sitting by the window, staring straight ahead. I froze. He didn't turn, but his voice came, low and gravelly. Right gate now. I turned and ran. Didn't look back. Raced to the nearest help desk. Slammed the call button. An agent finally came out, young, tired, visibly annoyed. I told her everything. The man, the following, the card, the new gate. She blinked slowly, then said, "You're still at gate B17. No change." I pointed to the board behind her. It still listed D4. She stared at it, frowned, then typed something on her computer. "No," she said. "That's a glitch. Flight 3486 is still departing from B17. You should head back before boarding begins." I hesitated, but he was there at D4, waiting for me. She looked confused. "Ma'am, there hasn't been anyone at D4 since 11 p.m. That concourse is closed overnight." I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I waited near a group of families boarding a different flight, blending in. When my gate finally opened again and my group was called, I walked fast. I scanning every face. No sign of him. I took my seat on the plane, shaking. Even once we took off, I couldn't relax. I kept expecting him to appear from the restroom, or to be sitting 2 rows behind me, but he wasn't. For months, I told myself it was stress, a tired brain conjuring paranoia. But then, last week, I got an envelope in my mailbox. No return address. Inside was a business card. Same kind. Blank front. On the back, in the same shaky writing. Final boarding call. Last chance to follow. No postmark. No stamp. As if someone had hand-delivered it. I don't know what he wanted. I don't know what would have happened if I had sat beside him, or stayed in that room with him at D4. But I do know this. When I called the airline to ask about that flight, the one from B-17 that morning, they told me flight 3486 never existed. And gate D4? That section was shut down last spring, after an incident involving a trespasser who impersonated a passenger, a man in his 50s, wearing a windbreaker and a cap. He'd been banned from all domestic flights, but the file said they never caught him. He just disappeared, somewhere in the terminal, still waiting, still boarding, still smiling. I grew up on a dead-end street called Maple Hollow. It was the kind of quiet suburb where kids rode bikes until the porch lights came on, and everyone knew whose dog was barking just by the sound. For most of my childhood, nothing truly bad ever happened there, until the Maddox family moved in. They took the house at the very end of the block, the one with the overgrown hedge and for sale sign that had been sitting untouched for nearly 2 years. The house wasn't haunted or anything, but it always gave me a weird feeling, like it was waiting for the wrong people to move in. The Maddoxes turned out to be exactly that. It started with small things. They never introduced themselves. No moving truck, no real estate agent, no welcome signs. Just there one day, the grass was suddenly cut. The lights were on. Their car, a faded black Lincoln with dark, tinted windows, appeared in the driveway. We tried to be neighborly. My mom sent over a welcome basket, and it was returned the next morning, untouched, but with a folded note inside. We do not accept food from strangers. After that, we all backed off. There were 4 of them. The father, Mr. Maddox, was tall, stiff, always in a suit, even when he stood motionless in the front yard at 2 a.m., which I saw him do twice. The mother wore long dresses and wide-brimmed hats, never showing her face. And then there were the kids, a boy around 14 and a girl a bit younger. They were pale, thin, and had this unnatural calmness about them. They never ran, never shouted, never showed emotion. We nicknamed them the Hollow Family. I was 16 at the time, and my friend group, Jake, Bree, and Michelle, thought it was funny. We started watching the Maddoxes from a distance, taking photos, making jokes, pretending we were uncovering some suburban cult. But it stopped being funny when they started watching us. It began with the daughter. She'd appear across the street when I walked home from school, just standing, watching, never blinking. Jake said he caught the boy following him home from the skate park, walking 10 paces behind, stopping every time Jake turned around. Michelle found a note slipped under her windshield wiper that said, in block letters, "Your family doesn't know what you did." Then one day, Bree didn't come to school. We thought she was sick. But when Jake and I went to her house, her mom looked frazzled, said Bree wasn't feeling well, didn't want to talk. We left confused. That night, Bree texted me, "Don't mess with them anymore. Seriously, I saw what's in their basement." That was the last time she ever mentioned it. And she never hung out with us again. We couldn't let it go. Jake was furious. Said we needed proof. Said if we could catch them doing something illegal, we could show the cops, or at least get them kicked out. So we made a plan. Saturday night, we'd sneak onto their property, just long enough to peek through windows or maybe get a look into the garage. Michelle backed out last minute, so it was just me and Jake. We waited until midnight, dressed in black, and crept down the block. The neighborhood was silent, all the other houses asleep. The Maddox home had a single light on, in the basement. The window was half buried behind a patch of dead shrubs. We crouched low and peeked in. What we saw didn't make sense. The basement was filled with mannequins, dozens of them, lined up in rows. Some were wearing clothes. Some weren't. Some had wigs. Others had faces painted crudely with lipstick and marker. But the thing that froze my blood was the mannequin in the front row. It wore Bree's favorite red hoodie, and taped to its chest was a school photo of her. We ran straight home. Didn't say a word until we were back in my room, door locked. Jake wanted to call the police. I agreed. But when we picked up the phone, there was no dial tone. Cell reception? Gone too. Just static. Jake went home to use his landline. Promised to call me the moment he got through. He never did. The next morning, my mom said Jake had gotten into a fight at school and was suspended, which didn't make sense because it was Sunday. I biked to his house. His parents said he was grounded for skipping class and wouldn't come out. But I saw the curtains move upstairs. And in the window, Jake was standing there, staring at me. Expressionless. Just like the Maddox kids. Over the next week, things unraveled. Michelle stopped replying to texts. Bree's family moved away in the middle of the night. Jake stopped showing up entirely. And the Maddox family? Still there. Still smiling. Still standing too still. I told my parents everything. They didn't believe me. Said I was obsessing. That I needed sleep. But I knew. I knew what I saw. I waited until the next rainstorm, late at night, and returned to the Maddox basement window. The mannequins were gone. But in their place, lined up in chairs, were my friends. Bree, Michelle, Jake. Eyes open. Unblinking. Still. Each one with a photo pinned to their chest. And me? My photo was taped to the empty chair in the middle. I moved away that summer. I never looked back. But last week, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside was a photo of my current house, taken from the sidewalk. And on the back, scrawled in neat, perfect handwriting. There's still a chair for you. You'll be the centerpiece. When you're a teenager home alone for the first time, you don't expect your phone to become your worst enemy. It started with one missed call. I was 16. My parents were out of town for 4 days. Mom was helping my aunt recover from surgery, and Dad was traveling for work. I convinced them to let me stay home alone. I swore I'd be responsible, that I'd study, do laundry, and keep the doors locked. They hesitated, but I was a straight-A student. They trusted me. That was a mistake. The first call came on a Tuesday afternoon. I'd just gotten home from school. Dropped my backpack in the hallway, reheated leftover mac and cheese, flopped onto the couch. My phone lit up on the coffee table, an unknown number. Not no caller ID, just wrong. It was a string of numbers too long to be real. 17 digits, mostly zeros and sevens. Like someone leaned on their phone until they gave up. I didn't answer. It stopped ringing after one chime. Weird, but I brushed it off. Until it happened again. And again. 6 calls in the span of an hour, all from slightly different impossible numbers. No voicemails, no texts, just single rings. I blocked the first few. Didn't matter. New numbers replaced them. That night, while I was brushing my teeth, another one came through. The caller ID didn't even try this time, just said, "Unknown caller." I watched it ring, just stared at it. I answered, "Hello." No reply. I listened. At first, there was silence. Then I heard a faint clicking, like an old rotary dial, followed by shallow, steady breathing. It didn't sound like someone out of breath. It sounded mechanical, like a sound file playing on a loop. Then came a voice. Male. Deep. Flat. "You look different with the lights off." My heart dropped. I was in the bathroom. Lights on. But the hallway behind me was dark. I turned slowly. Nothing. Who was this? I snapped. The call ended. I ran through the house, turning on every light. Every room. Every hallway. Checked all the locks. The windows. Everything was secure. I told myself it was a prank. That someone at school got my number. But it didn't feel like a prank. It felt targeted. Like someone was playing a very specific, very cruel game. The next day, it got worse. I stayed home from school, claimed I had a migraine. My parents didn't question it. I spent the morning pacing, thinking, waiting. At 10:47 a.m., I got a voicemail from an unknown number. I played it. It was short. 6 words, whispered in the same flat voice. "She can't help you this time." I froze. Who was she? My mom. My neighbor, Mrs. Kemp, who checked on me yesterday. How would they know she came by? I started checking the windows. Every hour. Pulled the curtains closed. Turned off my phone's Bluetooth. Shut off location services. I even downloaded a signal tracker to try and detect hidden devices. Nothing came up. Still, The calls kept coming. I stopped answering them. Didn't matter. That night, at 1:13 a.m., my landline rang. That phone hadn't rung in years. I didn't even remember we had it plugged in. I stared at the handset, watching it ring. No ID. No number. I picked up. This time, the voice spoke immediately. "You left the window unlocked." My blood ran cold. I ran to my room. The window was shut, but the lock was undone. I was sure I'd locked it. Positive. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the living room couch with the lights on and a knife on the table beside me. At 2:41 a.m., a text came through. From my own number. "You can't hide in the light." I called the police the next morning. I explained everything. Left out the part about the text coming from my number. They already thought I was stressed, maybe experiencing some kind of paranoia. They sent an officer to patrol the area. Told me to stay indoors. Keep my phone off at night. When I asked them to check the landline, they said there were no incoming calls listed. No record at all. They suggested a power surge or a memory error in the system. But I knew better. Friday night, it escalated. I was watching TV when the power went out. Not just a flicker. Total blackout. The house was dead silent. I reached for my phone. No signal. Then the landline rang again. I picked it up, hands shaking. "It's time to come outside." I dropped the phone. Ran to the kitchen. I grabbed my flashlight, pointed it toward the front door, and stopped. Through the curtain, I saw a figure. Standing at the edge of the yard. Not moving. Just waiting. Wearing a gray hoodie. Head down. Arms at their sides. I froze, too scared to speak. Then they slowly raised a hand. Held up a phone. And waved. I screamed. Ran upstairs. Locked myself in the bathroom. Called 911. This time, the call went through. A dispatcher told me to stay put. Officers would be there in minutes. I waited. By the time they arrived, the power was back. The figure was gone. The officers searched the yard. Found footprints barefoot, they said, despite the cold. But the cameras? Our security footage cut out exactly when the power failed. Everything between 9:17 and 10:06 p.m. was missing. When my parents got back, they didn't believe the full story. They believed I was scared. But not about what. My mom even said, "Honey, you've been watching too many crime shows. You probably saw a shadow and filled in the rest." They changed the locks, replaced the windows, installed a new camera system, but they couldn't fix the feeling I had, that I wasn't alone anymore, that someone had opened something. Weeks passed. The calls stopped. Life slowly returned to normal. Until last week. I was out of town, visiting my cousin across the country. One morning, I woke up to a notification. A missed call. From my house phone, followed by a voicemail. I played it. At first, just static. Then, faint breathing. And the voice, colder than ever. "You left the kitchen light on." That light was motion activated. And the house was supposed to be empty. Camping always seemed like a good idea until you were too far from help. Our group, 6 of us in total, had taken an annual spring camping trip since college. Now we were all in our late 20s, scattered across different cities and jobs, but we still made it a point to get together every March. That year, we picked a remote spot deep in the Arkansas wilderness. Not a regular campground. This was the kind of place you could only reach with a GPS pin, a lifted SUV, and a little too much confidence. We wanted isolation. We got it. There was me, my girlfriend Dana, our friends Luke and Sarah, and the twins, Matt and Mason, who'd been inseparable since day one of undergrad. We pitched 3 tents, built a fire, drank cheap beer, and told stories under a canopy of stars. There was no cell service, no ranger station nearby, and the only signs of other humans were faded tire tracks and an old stone well, cracked and half swallowed by the forest. We were off the grid, and for the first day and night, it was perfect. But everything changed on the second morning. I was the first one up, just after sunrise. I left the tent to start a fire and boil water for coffee, but stopped short, because parked at the edge of the clearing was a rusted old truck, not there the night before. A beat-up Chevy with mud-caked tires, shattered side mirrors, and a metal cage welded to the flatbed. No one was in it. No one nearby. I walked a slow circle around the vehicle. Inside, there were chains coiled on the passenger seat, and an old, leather-bound Bible, face down and stained. I backed away. By then the others had stirred. One by one, they came out and stared at the truck like it had grown there overnight. We argued for 10 minutes about whether to leave. But curiosity and probably a little ego kept us rooted. It wasn't until the sun was high that we saw the people. They emerged from the woods like they'd always been there. 3 of them. One tall man in overalls, one stocky woman in a brown dress, and one child barefoot, wearing a burlap sack like a dress. All of them had pale skin and wild hair. The child never looked up. The woman never blinked. The man smiled. He raised a hand in greeting. "Y'all folks lost?" he asked. We said no. "Just camping." He looked around, nodded slowly. Didn't think anyone be this far back. Sarah, ever the social one, asked if they were locals. "Oh, we're more than that," the woman said. The man laughed. "We got a little church, just through them trees. You're welcome to come tonight. We do our spring light ceremony after sundown. First one of the season." He gestured to the woods behind them. Dana squeezed my arm. "We appreciate it," I said, "but we're just here for the night." The child finally looked up, eyes completely white. Not blind, just not right. "Hope y'all sleep well," the woman said. Then they turned and walked back into the trees. No one said anything for a long time. Finally, Luke muttered, "Nope, we're leaving." But when we packed up and tried to drive out, we found the trail was blocked. 3 large logs had been dragged across the only drivable exit. Too big to move by hand. Too far from any tools. We stood in the middle of the trail, staring. "We waited out," Mason said. "We're 6 people. It's not like they can do anything." We made camp again. That night, no one drank. And no one slept well. At 2:14 a.m., I heard chanting. Low, rhythmic, almost like humming, but with words I didn't understand. I unzipped the tent and peeked out. A flickering glow pulsed through the trees, like firelight, but it moved too fast. Around the edge of the clearing, I saw them. More people now. At least 10. All standing, spaced evenly between the trees. Watching us. None of them moved. They just stared. Some wore clothes. Others were nearly naked, covered in dirt and chalky powder. One man had antlers strapped to his head. And then, just as suddenly, they were gone. Like they'd never been there. The next morning, Dana was gone. Her boots were inside the tent. Her phone was next to her pillow. No note. No trail. No sound. Just gone. We searched the woods for 5 hours. Yelled her name until our voices cracked. No sign. The only thing we found, 100 yards past the clearing, was a pile of ashes and a wooden cross, half-burned and carved with symbols none of us recognized. We didn't stay another night. We hiked out, left our gear behind, walked the full 11 miles back to the nearest ranger station. When we told them what happened, they said the trail we'd taken had been closed for over a year due to landslides. No way a truck could have made it up there, the ranger said. We showed them our GPS route. The ranger frowned. "This pin," he said, "that's not part of the park." We pulled up a satellite map. There was nothing there. No trail. No clearing. No stone well. Just solid trees. They sent out a search team. Never found Dana. Never found our tents, either. Just some torn canvas buried beneath a fallen tree half a mile away. They said it must have been disoriented memory, that we camped somewhere else. That people sometimes panic and misremember. But we all remember the same thing. We all heard the chanting. We all saw them. That was 5 years ago. We stopped talking about it. Drifted apart. It felt safer that way. But last week, I got a postcard. No return address. Just a picture of a stone well in a forest clearing. And on the back, written in perfect black ink, "The spring light ceremony begins again. You have a place. Bring a friend." Attached to the bottom was a Polaroid. It showed Dana, standing between 2 trees, smiling. And behind her, barely visible in the shadows, was the child, still barefoot, still watching.